Hi guys, Mike here. Today, I'm going to show you something really interesting: how to connect this grease trap to these 5 commercial kitchen sinks. These sinks are in a home's kitchen prep area, and each one serves a different purpose. One of them will be used for washing vegetables, so it's going to be connected to an open air gap drain to eliminate the risk of water backing up into it. I'll explain more about that later. Even though this kitchen is in a regular house, the exact same system can be used in a fully commercial kitchen. And if you only have one sink at home, you don't need a grease trap this big at all. You can go with a smaller unit that will fit right under the sink. It looks like this. You can find it on Amazon. Link to it and other products is in the description. It's much smaller than the one you see here, but even though it's smaller, the important thing is it installs the exact same way. The only difference is that instead of connecting to 5 sinks, you're only connecting it to 1. What is a grease trap? A grease trap is a device used to mechanically separate plant and animal fats from wastewater. Its main purpose is to protect the sewer system and wastewater treatment plants from being overloaded with grease. These separators are used everywhere that daily operations produce wastewater with high fat content, most commonly in the food service and food industry. How a grease trap works. A grease trap works on simple laws of physics. Wastewater entering the unit flows through the chamber at a slowed down rate. This lets heavier solids settle to the bottom while lighter fats float to the top. The clean water then drains out to the sewer system while the collected waste stays inside the unit until it's cleaned out. Why do we have so many sinks? We have 5 sinks, and each one serves a different purpose. The first 3 sinks are for washing dishes. The first of the 3 is for physically scrubbing off food debris, the second is for rinsing, and the third is for sanitizing. The next sink is the vegetable washing sink. The difference between this sink and the others is that it's not directly connected to the drain line. There's a gap between the sink and the drain. This setup exists for a simple reason. If the system gets clogged for some reason, the water won't back up into the sink and flood the clean vegetables. It'll simply spill out onto the floor and flood the kitchen instead, but the vegetables stay clean. Whoever came up with that deserves a Nobel Prize. I once worked in an open restaurant where staff were wading ankle deep in water because of exactly this problem. The last sink is the hand washing sink. It's the smallest one and has the simplest connection of them all. We'll start the whole installation with the strainers themselves going into the sinks. First, we'll install these 3 beautiful strainers into the 3 main sinks. These are the commercial version, built for very high water flow. This lever arm is used to open, close, and drain the water. For installing the strainer itself, we'll use plumber's putty. There are silicone options on the market too, and their upside is that they seal this type of strainer really well. Unfortunately, the big downside is that they tend to stain the sink, especially if it's stainless steel, and those stains are very hard to clean off afterward. That's why I prefer good old plumber's putty. Installation works like this. Take a chunk of the putty out of the plastic tub, then knead it until it becomes soft and pliable. Roll it into a rope shape, then press it around the edge of the strainer. Even though plumber's putty is very pliable, it does adhere to metal, but not so strongly that it feels solid. It can feel like it's peeling away a bit. That's completely normal. Drop the strainer into the sink drain opening, then prepare the bottom assembly with the valve. At this point, it's pretty important to install the gaskets in the right order. The paper gasket should go between the metal rotating piece and the rubber gasket. The rubber gasket should sit directly against the sink itself. Thread the prepared assembly onto the top part of the strainer you already installed in the sink. Tighten the bottom piece until you've squeezed out almost all of the plumber's putty, and position it so the drain lever handle faces the front of the sink. In the final step, remove the excess putty and center the strainer perfectly in the opening. Then repeat the same procedure for the other 2 sinks. Unfortunately, once a strainer and the sink's legs are installed, they block you from doing the same rotating technique on the remaining strainers. So instead of turning the bottom piece, you have to change technique and use a tool to tighten the drain nut from above. I don't actually own that tool, so I use channel lock pliers instead. It's not a perfect technique, but I managed to tighten both nuts that way. The next sink uses the standard strainer style you'd normally find in a kitchen sink. Of course, if you want, you can also install the fancier version here. In my case, this sink sits unusually low, so every inch of clearance between the drain and the strainer matters. The installation is done exactly the same way as before, but for the final tightening, we need that specialty tool. If you don't have one, plumbing pliers will get the job done too. The last, tightest strainer goes in the same way. I used plumbing pliers again for the final tightening. As always, tighten with a light touch. You don't want to squeeze all the putty out from between the sink and the strainer. All the strainers are installed. Now for the fun part, installing the grease trap. Before installing the grease trap itself, we need a little bit of theory. There are two types of grease traps. One's installed on the surface, floor mounted, and one's installed below the floor or ground. This grease trap is a versatile, fairly small model, but even smaller ones exist. Restaurants use septic tank size grease traps installed outside the building. If you don't want your plumber, especially the 40-year veteran kind, to have a heart attack, or at the very least break out in an ugly rash, you need to install vents on both sides of the grease trap. You can't see it here, but the pipe coming out of the wall is a vertical pipe that runs up through the roof, meaning it's vented. It looks like this diagram. You need to install another vent on the other side of the grease trap, and that one can also run out to the outside, or it can be connected to a Shervent air admittance valve. That's a type of valve that lets air in but blocks water from flowing out, like this one. This kind of device is going to make my installation a lot easier. Now, the most important part. We need to identify which side of the grease trap is the inlet and which is the outlet. If we get this wrong, the unit won't work correctly. In my case, both sides are clearly labeled. Once that's done, it's worth dry fitting the unit to check you have enough space. In my case, I need to shorten the pipe coming out of the wall. It's really tight in here. After cutting, connect the grease trap to the pipe using this rubber coupling, which you can buy at pretty much any hardware store. Now pay close attention, because before I install the vent, I need to explain what's about to happen in this video. The manufacturer of this navy blue grease trap included a vent T-connector with the kit. This fitting has a built-in flow restrictor to slow down the water entering at high speed, and also to let the grease trap breathe fully. However, since one of the sinks is going to have an open air gap drain, I was concerned that when it drains, we'd risk overflowing that drain. So I decided to drill that opening out larger. But even after drilling it out, the solution looked ridiculous. So I decided to install this T-connector temporarily just to see how it would behave. Don't copy this. The vent pipe here is only a temporary test setup. What actually happened and how it should ultimately be done is at the end of this video, and the final version will look like this. So right after the grease trap, we install another vent. Remember, this is only the temporary version. To connect the T-fitting to the metal grease trap, we again use a rubber coupling. Let's assemble the second SureVent air admittance valve. We thread it on using Teflon tape at the joint to the cemented fitting. Then we connect it to a short piece of pipe to join it to the elbow. Again, this isn't the final setup, but we can prep it now for later use. A bit about the pipe cement itself. I use a miter saw to cut the pipe, but really you can use anything capable of cutting PVC. If the pipe has burrs after cutting, they need to be deburred/removed. For measuring, I use a tape measure and a marker. Connecting the sinks. From here on, all connections will be made using PVC pipe and this PVC cement. Links to all the products are in the description, or you can scan this code. Next, we need to connect the large diameter metal strainers to PVC, and for that, we use these PVC slip nuts. For this joint, we use Teflon tape, not cement. Wrap the tape in the direction the nut turns, not against it. Water likes the slope to flow down, so we always install the pipe at a slight downward angle in the direction of flow. A small level is useful for checking this. Before applying cement, we use this purple primer on both sides of the joint. Primer works better than paint and tends to get its purple color on everything around it, so it's best to apply primer to all the joints first before cementing anything. Before applying cement, always double check that your cut pipe pieces are the right length. The cement bonds pipe in a matter of seconds, and the last thing you want is pieces that don't fit together. Elbow fittings are shaped/angled in the direction of flow, so pay attention to how you install them. Make sure to apply cement evenly across the whole surface of the pipe. More cement gives you more working time and more chance to pull the joint apart if needed. Try to work clean and precise, not necessarily the way I do it. Once you're sure a pipe is cut to the right length, apply the cement, join the section, and hold the pieces in position for about 20 seconds. If something's off, you have a few seconds to pull the joint apart before it sets, so it's worth double checking that everything fits before you commit. Once we've got the first 3 sinks assembled, we can move on to the vegetable sink. First, we install the drain pipe and cut it to the required length. This lets us measure the remaining distances more precisely. Next, we prep the joint between the T-fitting and the open, air gap drain itself. For this, I used a 2-inch to 3-inch reducer fitting. It'll end up looking like this. Unfortunately, because the grease trap is fairly tall and this sink sits pretty far away, the gap between the sink strainer and the drain itself is minimal. But there's nothing I can do about that. The sink is already installed as high as it can go. Then I cement the entire pipe run together, and since it's a fairly long run, I use these 2 brackets to stiffen the assembly, screwing them into the sink's legs. Now for the trickiest part. We need to connect this 1¼ inch pipe to a 2-inch pipe, and they're not in line with each other. For this, I used a slip coupling and this combination of 22-degree elbows. Marking the joints ahead of time lets you put everything together without making mistakes. Okay, the whole assembly is connected. Time to run a test. In the meantime, I added another bracket on the other side of the sink run for extra rigidity. Everything worked the way it should, but when I filled all the sinks with water and drained them all at once, the open drain immediately started overflowing. Basically, this grease trap is a bit too small for this many sinks, and the metal vent elbow didn't have enough capacity for the water flow. So, as you probably guessed, I decided to swap it out for a standard 2-inch elbow and cemented it into the existing joint with the sinks. I also raised the height of the second vent so it sits higher than the lowest drain in the whole sink run. It now sits right below the highest sink. I connected it to the pipe using a rubber coupling, which allows it to be disconnected later if needed. Once the installation work is done, we can screw the lid onto the grease trap to seal it up. That's it! If this video helped you, drop a like. YouTube thinks you might be interested in this video. See you next time.